but the anger persists. That the dirty, evil bastards are still in power. And that is the social commentary of the movie. There are no elites like Lady B who would help out to preserve tradition, who have the means to do so. The ones who remain in Poland are impoverished. Those who survived the uprising and were not lucky enough to find themselves in the West were sent to the Gulag, were shot, went to jail. This was Polish reality. World War II did not end in Poland until 1989. And this is simply a fact of life. There were other symbols which I don't know you were able to decipher. I'm sure you all have picked up on universal hostility toward communist symbols like Stalin's cake, the skyscraper. It's not the case among the powers that be, but it is certainly the case on the street. They all know that Stalin built a monument to himself in the middle of Warsaw, and the monument still stands. And the kids and normal people want it out. Not so much the powers that be. There were several very interesting vignettes. There was a little snippet of an insurgent, a second lieutenant, carrying a little boy. Well, there was a 12-year-old insurgent. He had burnt a German tank and died in battle. A 12-year-old. The Germans found themselves, when Warsaw capitulated, with about 60 underage insurgents, because the rest were ordered to blend in with the civilian population. But 60 who were orphans simply surrendered with the rest of the survivors. And the Germans had no provisions. There were no provisions in the Geneva Convention. What do you do with a 12-year-old corporal who has a cross for bravery? Well, you put him in a stalag? So the Germans didn't really know what to do with them. And finally, they put him to work in some kind of a factory. And most of those kids survived. Some of them were crazy because in April, at the end of April, that particular platoon reformed and joined the Americans in shooting at the retreating Germans. So some of them were killed then in April and May 1945. There was also a very interesting fragment with psychological warfare. Namely, the Germans would grab some of the refugees, especially the most despondent and hysterical people, and they would be put on the horn, meaning they'd be given a microphone and say, "Oh my God, my daughter died," and the woman would be allowed to cry and lament to undermine the morale of the insurgents and the civilian population. Very insidious. So the movie is chock full of symbols, both present-day symbols and historical symbols. There is product placement. You have humble graves of the insurgents in Warsaw, and this mammoth monument to Poland's communist leaders, Bolesław Bierut, which we can't get rid of. It's right in the middle of the military cemetery. Do you know why we can't get rid of it? And the Poles? Well, various arguments have been deployed, including we cannot desecrate graves. I don't want to desecrate the grave. I want to move the NKVD man's remains to the fence, out of the center of the cemetery. However, the family says now it's private property. So you can't move it. And it's honey, take a hike. Or you'll be fired, take a hike. You don't remember me, but I remember you tried to make me inform on my mates. The worker was a solidarity guy, and the company owner was a secret policeman. When the worker said, "I remember you because you tried to force me to inform on my mates, or else you denied my child Western medicine," that was a secret policeman who tried to blackmail a solidarity person to become a snitch. if he didn't become a snitch, his child would not get treatment, medical treatment. So you see, none of this needs to be explained in Poland. The movie is your grandparents take you. If they survive and they tell you about what happened. Why do Poles celebrate? Well, why do they commemorate? Well, why do Americans commemorate 9/11? Because we find value in certain events that happened in the past and we would like to remember. In a variety of ways, my friends in France remember the great anti-French revolution because they're monarchists, Catholic monarchists. They hate the revolution in France. So they remember it as the great anti-French revolution. And then July 14th is the day of misery for them. Well, everybody else celebrates the revolution in France. So societies find ways to commemorate and concentrate on things that they find memorable and that they think the past ought to live. For anything is alive as long as we remember. Same with individual death. I remember my departed. They will never die for me. Oftentimes, I'm asked, well, why did they fight? The uprising had no chance whatsoever. Well, it's very hard to provide a generic cross-cultural explanation. But the best I can come up with in a one-liner would be to remind you about Mel Gibson's Braveheart. One fellow yells, "Let's fight the English." Another fellows disagree. No, the English are too many. And the fellow retorts, "We don't have to win. We just have to fight them." You see? A churlish way to explain would be rape. Are you going to enjoy it? Even though you have a 400-pound gorilla on top of you? Whether you're a male or female, upper body strength dictates the outcome. What are you going to do? So here's not so much a justification, but an explanation why anybody would fight when chances for victory are nil. For goodness sake, Hitler had the Poles in his grip, and Stalin was coming. How worse could it have been? Why remember? Well, in the interwar period, in the 1920s and 30s in Poland, the Polish elites, the grassroots, and the government remember the insurrection of 1863. Special squads of volunteers, military and civilian, traversed the countryside and would put up crosses with inscriptions to the insurrection of 1860. They were put up at retirement homes. When my grandmother's grandmother was an insurgent in 1863, fighting in the cavalry, of course, died, she was accompanied to her grave by a platoon of lancers. And the funeral was at the state expense. And she had just been a cavalrywoman. So it was 1934, very significant. The same thing we see now. It's not just a popular wave, but it started right after 1989. A friend of mine in Wrocław, a PhD now, commenced by looking for underground, anti-Nazi underground people who were executed and buried in anonymous graves by the communist secret police. That was one of the first things he did. And there is an enormous work done in history, not only to keep the memory alive, but to bring the people who were suppressed and murdered by history, in particular after the war, back to into the national psyche. Now you can go to the archives, you can publish anything you want. There are just no means, or very few means to do so. But volunteers and others produce, and they share, and there is interest. I wouldn't say there is market, meaning you won't build yourself a villa on Côte d'Azur with the proceeds. I'm so sorry. But there is a great deal of interest. There are reenactors and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, kids who remember completely spontaneously. Normal. Abnormal is to do nothing, not to fight. When you look at the insurrectionist tradition, you'll see masses of remembrance. You'll see cyclical visiting of graves and learning about uprisings. And it's not just about Warsaw Uprising. It depends naturally what your background is. But when I was a child, 4 or 5 years old, and I'd walk around with my grandmother, men in my family died faster. Women are much more resilient. My grandmother would point out to things. Oh, here's where our boys took on the Russians in 1794 during the Kościuszko insurrection, and your ancestor signed the instrument of insurrection. He's number 462. Great. Of course, when you're 5 years old, you don't know what 1794 is. Maybe it was yesterday, or 3 days ago. I just didn't remember. You know, we'd go around, and she'd point at the statue of Prince Joseph Poniatowski and said, "Oh, this is a commanding officer of your great-great-great-grandfather, who died at Zaragoza in Spain in 1806." But the fellow equestrian statue of Prince Joseph Poniatowski, an equestrian statue by Thorvaldsen, the Rodin of Denmark, wears a Roman toga. So I was completely confused. My ancestor with the Roman legions? No, but the most important thing is that he fought. This is how children are introduced to the insurrectionist tradition. I was told about my ancestors fighting in the 1830 insurrection. I was really excited because one of our relatives through marriage is a plater. So there was an 18-year-old colonel who raised her own regiment and fought in the cavalry. Hey, this is a family. So I was very excited about it. America, thank God, doesn't need that. But in Poland, it's absolutely normal. When the evil ones come, everyone fights. Everyone fights. I hope it won't be necessary in America. At any rate, family stories, when one grew up under totalitarianism, were the main conduit to the past. That's what allowed memories to persist. Its significance for national consciousness must never be underestimated. In fact, there is almost a rule. If you are Polish, you embrace defeat. Why? Hey, we celebrate the Battle of Grunwald too in 1410, July 15th, my birthday, which the Poles won. Well, my family was there too, I know that. But we do not, in Poland, discriminate against defeat. The important thing is you stood up, and when the evil ones came, you resisted. That's the important lesson. That's why the Poles embrace the defeat. The Poles worship the heroes and martyrs, and therefore everyone is expected to be ready to sacrifice. Now, some people will say, "Oh, but we saw the communists. They don't give a hoot about anything." Yes, But mainstream doesn't consider communists Poles. They're just Polish-speaking people. A Pole, from the perspective of tradition in the past, is not an ethno-anthropological term. It's a badge of honor. I have Tatars in my family. I have basically, my family is of a Ruthenian origin. A Pole means that you fight. A Pole means that you care. That's what it means. It's very bizarre. Americans should be able to relate to it. You can be of a multitude of ethnicities, and you still consider yourself Polish. It's a choice. And of course, when you're Polish, you're ready for any conspiracy. Even I was in one when I was young and beautiful. I just got my secret police documents. When I was really little, I grew up with the dinosaurs. And one of the things we did, I remember, was we went to the cemetery to clean graves. Did you know that the communists would send communist secret police to chase us out because we're cleaning graves? Yeah. Plainclothes secret policemen. That was in the 60s, when I was young and beautiful. Earlier, you would have been arrested had they caught you congregating and conspiring in the cemetery. By commemorating the dead, you were reminding the world that the Soviet army was on the other side of the river, several hundred yards, doing nothing. When I was about 10 years old, I was so excited about one of the dinosaurs. One of my grandmother's friends, Jan Rossmann, was an engineer. He was a lieutenant in the Home Army. He was a deputy commander of Grey Ranks, the Boy Scout and Girl Scout underground. And he lived as well about 200 meters away from my grandmother, so not even a block away. I always listened to his stories, his many stories, and would never leave this room if I locked the dam, but not the sewer. And he succeeded. He said the hardest part was to cling on for your life to some kind of a metal bar, because for the next 2 hours the feces flew. When he emerged at the end of the day in the adventure, he received Poland's highest military order, the Virtuti Militari cross. And when people asked him what was it for, he said, for swimming in feces. Now, the Virtuti Militari is an important decoration. The two first recipients were Thadeusz Kościuszko and Prince Joseph Poniatowski for the Battle of Zielenice. I think it was in 1792. Yeah. At any rate, in the Polish army, there are no wounded badges. The Virtuti Militari is 3 times the value of the Congressional Medal of Honor. You would have had to run and caught a German tank with your teeth, practically. Hardly anybody gets the Virtuti Militari. It's one of the highest decorations. I was so inspired by the story that I went into the sewer. My mother was not pleased when I emerged. So I was 10. Of course, the level of sewage was a little bit lower, yet I dipped because I wanted to be an insurgent. That is the background, and in my milieu, that was the norm. For a long time in my life, until I was 15, I never met indifferent human beings. This is when, in high school, I was put out to be with people who just were from a different fairy tale. Okay, so let me tell you a few things about the uprising to Siberia, to the camps. The commanders of the Home Army in Warsaw knew about it. They didn't make up their mind about the uprising as late as July 20th, 1944. The Warsaw garrison was depleted by 900 submachine guns, which were dispatched to the east to assist home army units there. They really didn't plan to launch an uprising. Why did they launch an uprising? A minority on the general staff manipulated the commander-in-chief, who agreed. And a day later, he knew he made a mistake. Why did the minority resolve to stage an uprising? The